If you're someone who's passionate about transforming education, which you are if you're listening to this podcast, you should check out the Charles Koch Foundation. The Charles Koch Foundation supports social entrepreneurs and organizations that are embracing innovation to build better solutions for today's learners. Visit ckf.org to learn more. Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. Dr. Joe Salustio here with you on another episode. It's funny, I got a piece of mail from someone recently that said, why do you keep saying another episode when we know that you're going to keep doing these over and over? And I said, well, that's a good point. Maybe I should just say, here I am again, or back with you one more time. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with the intro, but I'm going to figure something out. When this episode airs, we may be close to 400 episodes. In fact, what is today's? Today, I'm just going to say it. Today, while we're recording, is the 25th of January. So this episode will come out probably a month from now. But why this date is important is because today is our official 2-year anniversary from the release of our first episode, which was me and Elvin talking to each other about this crappy podcast we're going to put together, and we didn't know if anybody would listen besides our wives, neither of which actually listened, and our family members, which my mom was one of the first. My mom and my wife were like, yeah, you suck, this, you guys sure you want to do this podcast? Anyway, 115,000 downloads later, international recording, guests all across the board. I guess it marks 2 years. So I'll just leave it there. I'm happy today to always bring together firsts. What I think has taken our podcast to the next level is guest co-hosts that are fans of the show and fans of our content, and guests that we intersect with that are just doing really important work. And I have one of both, a first-time guest and a first-time co-host. And, I love to do this. I got to bring in my guest co-host first. Here she is. She is the CEO of Ellison Ellery Consulting. Her name is Renee Seltzer.
Oh, thank you. Only that literally followed me everywhere I went.
I can't stop. I can't stop the crowd from reacting, Renee. That's what they decided to do is react positively. How are you? And are you excited to be here as a first-time guest co-host on the EdUp Experience?
I am super excited. This is going to be awesome. And Ben Nelson is amazing. So I'm excited to ask him questions and just learn about him. So this is going to be really cool.
Well, I'm glad that you dished on our guest, Renee, before I had a chance to introduce him. That's why we love the EdUp Experience, because we just never know what we're going to get from our combos of guests and go. So I'm going to bring him in right now. Here he is, Ben Nelson. He's founder of Minerva Project and University. Ben.
It shocked me. I got the same applause. I was expecting beige and tomatoes, but that's one of the benefits of being.
I was going to go with something like this because I know you're appreciative of a good old time. But it didn't seem that appropriate, But every now and then I'll hit somebody with a curveball. Ben, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited that you're here. Of course, we met each other for the first time at the World Innovation Summit for Education in Doha, which, boy, what a country Qatar is. I mean, did you have just a great experience like we did?
Oh, absolutely. I've been to Doha a few times, and it really is astonishing, not just in Doha, but really in many of the Gulf states, how there's a really deep leaning into the substance of education reform and innovation, which I think a lot of places pay lip service to it, but there are folks there who are actually trying to do good things. And that's, I find that to be relatively rare in the education sector.
Yeah, I mean, truthfully, true it is. And, Minerva, you're doing innovative things. It's funny, we did a panel, and I'm gonna go on my memory here, which, it's cloudy as I get older, but I said Minerva was disrupting the space, and you said, no, we're not actually a disruptor, we're a reformer. I think is the exact quote. I have to go back and listen to our episode again, and I would encourage everybody to go listen to that episode of the EdUp Experience. It's the level set for us, for those that have not come across Minerva. What is the Minerva Project? Talk about Minerva University. Why did you set out on this journey to reform the space, and where are you today?
Yeah, it's we have a very different perspective on a lot of things in the world, but one of our perhaps most controversial perspective is that the biggest disruptive force in the education sector are the educational institutions themselves. And that may sound ridiculous. I mean, they're the incumbents, they're the ones that aren't, that are slow moving, that people blame are not changing, but people don't really understand what disruption is. The concept of disruption is that you enter a sector and you lay waste to the sector, you disrupt it. The incumbents fall, they go out of business, and then a competitor comes in that is before served a low end of the market and slowly takes over the rest of the space. And in our perspective, it is the existing incumbents that are disrupting themselves because they're delegitimizing their role in society.
Yikes!
Right, and that's not exactly a way that people think about it, but that's why we believe that there needs to be reform, because we actually are big believers in education. We think education is important. We think that if you're not producing educated citizens, then you're going to have a very hard time finding not only leaders, but actually participants in a liberal democracy or in civic society. But when we think about university experiences, we think about our own alma maters, we think about our own education, we think about the education of our friends, of our colleagues, we go and talk to them and say, hey, how was your university experience? The responses are, oh, university was fun, I had a great time, it was expensive, so I with a lot of debt.
Cheers!
A lot of that, right?
But
Cheers!
Exactly. But what they don't say is, boy, did I learn a lot. Boy, is what I did then relevant to everything I do today, day to day. Oh, I wouldn't be able to do my job if it weren't for that university education. That, because it's now entered our common understanding of education. We think of universities as places that certify us because we have to get the certification. That is a disruptive force. A reform is to actually make sure that those institutions recapture their legitimacy and their centrality in society, not just as a place to be certified because you need it, but as a place to be educated, because an uneducated person isn't going to be as successful in life or in society than if they were to take a different path.
So before I pass it to you, Renee, because I know you have burning questions, I want to follow up, Ben, because you said something that I'm going, yep, that is exactly right. And I think why there's so much confusion, and that's because of what you said, where, what does the student say? Do they say, yes, I just loved my learning experience and it changed my life and now I'm in this career because of that? Instead, and you know this, and we talked about it, it's, you know what? I'm not sure if my education really helped me, and I'm wondering if that was the best path for me. And maybe my son or daughter doesn't really need to do this college thing anymore because it didn't help me. And the whole narrative around it, higher education, is changing. And I bring this up because I found it to be less. I don't know. I guess I found the value of higher ed to be much more embraced in the international community than in the U.S., where we're just talking about it all the time as maybe it's not the right path for people. Talk about that. Because if you're not saying how much the education changed your life, you're saying how the education didn't change your life. And isn't that our problem in the US right now?
That's exactly right. And in fact, if you think about how popular views of higher education institutions in the United States have plummeted over the past couple of decades, it is because that narrative has taken hold and it is not reversing. And even in international perspectives, remember that in most universities, in most places around the world, they haven't followed the American model. They're much more focused on the core certification, right? Like, for example, in British or German universities, or in universities in China and many other places in the world, you study one subject, right? And so you, in many ways, know, well, I need to be a lawyer, so I have to take a law degree, right? And so it's very much well, I know I've got to do it. Now, it's not to say that those students look at those institutions and say, wow, boy, did I learn a lot. Because they also look at those institutions and say, wow, that was a terrible waste of time, but I had to do it. And there was a one-to-one correlation. At the very least, I went, I did the thing, I got the certification, and I got the job, because nobody can get a job unless they have the law degree. Nobody can get the job unless they have the medical degree, et cetera. Whereas in the United States, because we at least embrace the idea of a liberal arts education that allows you to have liberty or freedom to be an enfranchised citizen, there's at least that element in the back of our minds that says, wait a second, I'm expecting to learn more. And so the disappointment levels are, I think, starker in the United States, not because we do a significantly worse job than universities are around the rest of the world. We probably actually do a slightly better job, but because the expectations are at least what they should be of these institutions, and the falling of that expectation is therefore that much bigger.
Love it. Renee?
And Ben, when you kind of say disrupting, I love to walk through like how your university and how your project is really doing that. Like, can you go into some of the details? I'd love to like,
yeah, absolutely. So we are reformers, not disruptors, because we don't show up and say, down with the old system. Let's do things outside of the accreditation regime. Let's not do 120 credit hours. Let's not have individuals with PhDs be your professors. Let's not have 2 semesters a year and 4 years in order to get your education. Because the reality is that those are all containers. Those are not the root cause of our problem. And yeah, if I were to draw a clean slate, do I think 120 credit hours is the magic number for a degree? Of course not. I mean, maybe 112 is better, or maybe 127. It doesn't really matter. But that's not actually the core argument. The core argument isn't let's rail against the size and shape of the container. It's the substance that's inside it. And so what Minerva does is that we rethink from the ground up, at least in the university that we built from initially ourselves as the prototype, as this beacon to the rest of the world of what a reformed institution can look like. We rethink who gets educated, what they learn, how they learn, and where they learn. And very, very briefly, the who is a truly need-blind process that is completely meritocratic, which means that every single applicant is treated with the exact same criteria to get in. And because of that, we have the most socioeconomically diverse student body of any highly selective university in the world. I can get into that later if you'd like. What a student learns is fundamentally systems thinking. Before they learn a subject matter, an intersection of subject matters, interdisciplinary areas, and most of our work is interdisciplinary, but far more importantly, the students learn various ways of thinking, not a way of thinking, not content, not perspective, but empirically proven cognitive tools that they then apply no matter what it is that they study or experience in life later on. We teach them in a way that is pedagogically different, where rather than disseminating information and assessing that recall of that information, we engage them in fully active learning, which is a technique that we developed based on 40 years of scientific research that makes sure that the students apply what they learn and therefore retain it. And we do so in a global experience where rather than sequestering the students on a campus, they live in 7 different countries, traveling as a group over 4 years, such that not only do they apply those systems of thinking from subject to subject, such that they can learn how to apply them broadly, but they also apply that learning culture to culture. And they develop that mental flexibility, not just in academic settings, but in real world settings as well.
How amazing is that? So like this one particular student goes to 7 different cities and lives there. And it is an immersive experience, not only educationally, but culturally. Like that's pretty remarkable. So how do you tell that story in a fragmented digital space? Like how do you get the students to really hear what you're saying and understand how different this is?
It's not easy. And it's taken us a decade. And I remember when we first started, we spent half of our time talking about our educational philosophy and half of our time talking about the global rotation. And the only thing the students heard was, I get to live in 7 different countries. And so we said, and some students applied not even realizing how rigorous and how difficult the program is. And so the next year, we spent about 75% of our time talking about the curriculum and our pedagogical approaches, and 25% of the time talking about the rotation cities. And our students said, oh my God, I get to live in 7 different cities. And I think you mentioned something about studying. And so we actually had to move to 90-10 in our communication before, in the students' ears, it was half about the global rotation and half about this radically new, vastly more demanding and effective educational methodology. But unfortunately, there isn't really a shortcut to talking about the depth of reform that is necessary if you really want to understand the details behind having a Minerva quality education versus the extant.
So do you feel like a lot of times you're talking to the student or the end or the parent, or is it a combination of both? Like who is your audience many of the times?
Yeah, it's interesting. It should be the combination of the two. But at least for our university, the Minerva University is not only extraordinarily challenging from a pedagogical and curricular perspective, it's also challenging from a maturity level. There are no cafeterias. You cook your own food from day one. You live in the heart of some of the biggest cities in the world. 4 months after moving into San Francisco, you pack your bags and you move to Asia. I mean, it's a demanding type of environment. And because of that, we really try to speak to the student, because a student that doesn't have the independent mindedness to be able to go into this wholesale, who really needs mom and dad's oversight and decision-making in the process, is probably not going to be able to handle the kind of strains involved in Minerva University. Now, of course, we talk to parents, we make sure that they understand what they need to understand, but our messaging and the challenge that we issue is to make sure that the students know what they are getting themselves into, because that's extraordinarily important. When we work with other institutions that don't have necessarily the global rotation and challenge, and we help reform their educational approach, that's a very different type of messaging, because they don't have the kind of demands on the day-to-day life of the students as we have at Minerva University.
I was just going to say, I have a friend whose kids are in college and she still checks their emails as their virtual assistant. And one of them's going on for a master's degree. And I'm like, I don't understand what you're saying to me. You respond to their emails like, well, they're too busy to do that. And I'm like, these are
she likes the oversight.
Yeah, I'm like, these are not going to be functional adults here.
Yeah, we don't allow that.
I can't launch.
So, let me jump in, Renee, because you can't ask all those questions without me having a follow up, because I got to jump in, because I go, okay, 10 years, Minerva's been there. You're iterating, reforming, and coronavirus comes into play. And now, does that change your iterating and reforming, or is this shown the demand even greater for the Minerva product because of the number of people that are just leaving the higher education system? So if you're going to do it right, kind of thing. And where does your vision plan change as we hopefully come out of this crazy time that we've been living in?
Yeah, very much the latter. When you think about what happened in the pandemic, I think, I think, Joe, we may have talked about this in another context, but I think the world has not actually learned the lesson of the pandemic when it comes to university education, which is that those institutions, which is effectively almost all of them, who delivered a bad educational experience and then had to move it online using technology, for them, their education got worse. Because if you don't know how to educate, but you've been trying to get people or students through the process in an offline environment, and now you have to change context, you are having yet another barrier ahead of you. Whereas places like Minerva, that were residential universities where all the students lived in the same building, yet all of our classes before the pandemic were conducted not in a room, not by getting 20 students around a table to sit together and just talk, but designed to be delivered on a purpose-built digital learning environment, right, with a lesson plan coded into that digital learning environment to optimize every student's learning, even though it's a live seminar. Professor is live, the students are live, all the students live in the same building, but all of the formal interactions are occurring via digital mediation. It's in those scenarios where you implement technologies where education gets better. So when you try to replicate a broken system in an analog world, in a digital world, the broken elements of it are exposed and fall apart. When you look at a broken analog system and say, how can you use digital to fix what's broken? Now you elevate the experience. And so what COVID has demonstrated for many institutions that are actually serious about fixing their learning process for their students, their learners, is that they have now gravitated to the only institution that was residential before the pandemic and opted to use technology at the core of what we were doing. Not because our students weren't there, not because it was hard to get them into a room, but because we understood that that modality of education is inferior. And that type of solution is really the only one in the market that existed before the coronavirus. And really all of the attempts at scrambling to use technology during the coronavirus were still ways to iterate off of a broken system as opposed to reforming that system from the ground up.
Wow.
Too many learners are being left behind by the current one-size-fits-all model of education. We here at EdUp and our friends at the Charles Koch Foundation see a better path forward. The Charles Koch Foundation supports innovators in education who are building and scaling new pathways to allow all learners to discover their potential. By changing the way we think about education, we can unlock opportunities for millions more Americans. To learn more about the Charles Koch Foundation support of individualized education, visit ckf.org. Love it. I love the way you talk about it. You're very well versed on these topics, and there's another one that I know might be a hot button for you, because it's always a hot button for me. And the U.S. News World and Report rankings came out recently. I thought about it. I'm going to ask you a question soon that's going to be like a curveball question, and I do this in every episode. And I thought maybe word association would be fun with guests, like where I go elite, and the guest has to say the first word that comes to their mind, or I say value, and then we might have to try that in the future. But rankings come out. And I said this in our panel, Ben, to where I have folks come on and they're like, hey, we were just ranked 5th, and oh God, that doesn't mean anything. And then I get them on the recording and it's like, yeah, so our university was ranked 5th for this and for that. And oh my God, we're so honored. And it's like, does U.S. News World and Report know that just people just like don't put value in that, or, they don't care, I guess. What do you say about elitism in higher ed, and how do you, the secondary question is, how do you take a reformed education that is Minerva and break through the noise or the monopoly that is held by that elitism?
Yeah. Well, it's I was actually just talking to a friend of mine recently, and I was explaining that we talk about big lies in society. Well, the biggest lie out there that has been perpetuated on roughly 7 billion humans is the idea that a higher ranked university provides a better education.
Yikes!
Because The reality is that when you look at where rankings derive from, and US News will say they have different methodologies, but somehow they come up with the exact same outcomes as Shanghai and everybody else. When it comes down to it, it's one thing and one thing only, which is what is the citation productivity of the research of your faculty? That's all it is. How good of a researcher is the average faculty member in your institution? And of course, how do you get better research? You throw more money at it. How do you throw more money at it? Those are the things that US News measures, which is how much money are you spending per professor? How many professors do you have per student? And how many students do you reject? Right? Those are the criteria. And so that would be fine if there was a positive correlation between the quality of research that a professor does and the quality of their instruction. Unfortunately, there's a negative correlation between the quality of research a professor does and the quality of their instruction. The reality is that the better a research institution is, the worse its educational outcomes are. Because, and this is obvious when you think about it, if you are hiring professors based on their research, you're promoting them based on their research, you're rewarding them based on their research, every minute they spend on education is hindering their career. And yes, you will have some research professors that understand their role and duty and embrace that, and counter to every incentive they have, still do their very best to deliver a good instruction for their students. But those are unfortunately the vast minority of research-oriented professors.
Yeah, I mean,
And
more
so-
time on research, less time on students, right? I mean, it's a like mathematical
Practically
calculation.
obvious,
Yeah.
right? So, but because the world has been fed this lie and institutions perpetuate it, you don't have an institution admitting and saying, look, we're ranked in the top 5 because we produce excellent research, and we sacrifice undergraduate education because we care about PhD education, right? Which is more correlated with outcomes for research than the quality of PhD outcomes. So we sacrifice that because we really care about this. Nobody actually says that. They don't admit it. They lean into that lie. They say, oh yes, you get a wonderful education at our top ranked institution, despite all of the research that demonstrates that can't possibly be true. And so all we do is we say, oh yeah, sure. Universities should be ranked based on their outcomes. Turns out we have the world's best outcomes. Therefore, we must be the world's best university. If we agree with what you're perpetuating as the underlying reasons for these rankings, then all you need to do is look at the outcomes of students. And we've demonstrated not only that we have the best academic outcomes for our students, but we can demonstrate that what our students do post-graduation, whether it is in the workforce, whether it's starting their own companies, or even going to graduate schools and their acceptances at top institutions, we have the best outcomes in the world, especially given the socioeconomic background of the students that study at Minerva. So just to put a little bit of a fine point on that,
That's pretty amazing.
The modal student, right, at an Ivy League university is a millionaire. The modal student at an Ivy League university or at Stanford or any of these highly selective institutions comes from a family that is worth well over $1 million. 53% of students at these institutions aren't eligible for financial aid from those institutions. Only 47% of Stanford undergraduates are eligible for financial aid from Stanford. That means that they come from the 2% wealthiest households in the country, right? 53% of Stanford undergraduates.
Did you see that thread about Wharton? There was a Twitter thread,
absolutely.
yes, and how just devoid they are on understanding what people make, what family income they have. And then also the other one was they asked the students, which one do you think is more fair? And then they showed like a little graph of how much people earn, and the top 1% earn the most. And they're like, well, that's the most fair. That's the most equitable. And what they meant was for me. It's most equitable for me.
Because that's their background, right?
Yeah.
The modal student at Minerva University comes from a family making less than $25,000 a year. 44% of our students come from families making less than $25,000 a year. 60% of our students come from families making less than $50,000 a year. And so to have outcomes that are better than Ivy League average with student populations that come from massively disadvantaged backgrounds is really the demonstration of educational outcomes, right? And so the rankings are should be a guide for which institutions not to apply to if you're an undergraduate, right? But because of this popular perception, we are just using that as a comparison point, because comparing our student outcomes with quote unquote the highest ranked institutions is the easiest job in the world.
Okay, guys, so I love this. I like to chop our episodes in half and get a little bit of a curveball question to our guest. And Renee, since you are also new, you get to answer one too. So I'm going to ask you yours first, Renee, so that Ben can think about his. All right, you ready?
All right.
The question to Renee is, what is the vacation, the dream vacation that you need to take that you didn't take during coronavirus? And the question that goes to Ben, and you get to think about this while I ask Ben, is what is your entrance music, Ben? What's the song that plays at commencement? What's the song that you would play in your living room as you walked in to sit down and watch a game? What introduces you? And Renee, you get the vacation question first and then over to Ben.
I have a good song.
Oh, wait. Before you guys answer, I got to do my thing. Here. Okay, over to you, Renee. Vacation.
Well, the day before, we were supposed to go to the Dominican Republic, and there's a resort. I have little kids, and we were supposed to go to Nickelodeon Studios where you get slimed, and it brings me back to the 80s. Like, my kids wouldn't know anything about that. And the day before COVID hit and the Dominican shut down. So we are redoing that vacation this year. So we're excited for that one.
Amazing. I would love to get slimed on Nickelodeon.
Slimed every day.
That sounds amazing. Ben, entrance music, my friend.
All right. Well, since you asked, we actually, and this you have a scoop because nobody knows this, but
they will now.
They will now. But in commencement, we did choose some special music to represent Minerva, which is leading up to the handing of the diplomas, which we don't do on stage and we do in a very unique way. We actually played Philip Glass's Koyaanisqatsi, which is all about the chaos of the world and all of the challenges that are in the extant in what we're surrounded by us. And then once the students had their diplomas and once they were official graduates, we played the small part of Mozart's The Magic Flute about the entrance to the Temple of Wisdom. And that's so those two things are kind of how we see the state of the world and then the responsibility of those who bear a Minerva education.
I'm going to just say that how refined you are, Ben, because mine was Motley Crue's Kickstart My Heart.
Oh, yeah.
So, I guess I'm going to go back and think about a new one maybe. But what you're talking about is interesting from that kind of sandwich perspective. Like, here's the craziness. Here's how you, with a Minerva education, become the outcome in a more organized world. We, and I'm going to say administrators, are now living in one of the most difficult times in higher ed for a number of reasons, right? There's just less people coming out of high school entering college. You've got more Black men leaving college and any other ethnic group that are just out by, hundreds and hundreds of thousands. You've got high competitiveness, more than we've ever seen because now everybody has online. So those schools that had on ground that were kind of in their niche, it used to be a value proposition to have online. Now everybody has it. And so there's that crowded marketplace. There is a growing contingent of nonprofit schools that are finally operating like higher ed as a marketplace. And so there's just a lot going on when it comes to competitiveness of higher education and so on. And I talk about this because as an administrator myself, I think about this all the time. How do we get the education? And I started my new gig at Lindenwood University. And how do I break through the noise? And how do I communicate our value and our quality? And I'm fighting against, and we fight against, this question of value. And I'm getting to the question, but now there's micro-credentials, and now there's Grow with Google, and now there's Amazon that's investing, and you have companies like IBM that have their own learning ecosystems, and higher ed may have lost its place. How do we get it back, Ben? How do we reestablish in a world and in the US where public opinion is questioning the overall intent and value of higher ed? What do we need to do as an institution to get that back?
So I think there are two things that institutions have to do. Number one, stop the delegitimization. If I think Bill Maher has this great perspective, which is, if it reads like an Onion headline, don't do it. And so when universities are, and again, this is an apolitical perspective, but from any side of the spectrum, if they're saying we're passing off a perspective as a fact, we are creating a homogeneity of opinion on any side of an issue, stop doing that. Stop delegitimizing what you're doing in the eyes of the public. Once the public loses trust in institutions of education, they lose trust in education. They lose trust in expertise. They lose trust in authority. And that is the collapse of a liberty-oriented society. It is a collapse of a society that has as a sovereign, the enfranchised citizen, as opposed to a king or another autocrat. And so you have to be able to stop the erosion of trust in these institutions. And it may go against your personal beliefs. It may go against what you really believe that students should think and approach the world doing, but it is extraordinarily destructive for the institution and therefore to society. But the second thing you need to do is you need to lean in to what is unique and special about a place that gives you 3-4 years of deep study to transform how you as a learner look at the world. And that means embracing the frameworks of thinking that all students should have as they pursue their life. And if universities reject this idea of teaching perspective as fact and instead embrace the teaching of systems of thinking as the pathway to learning, all of a sudden, they don't continue the delegitimization and they produce outcomes of students that they can actually use. And just by the way, a tiny little history lesson, in the late 1960s, when students at Brown universities were begging for the open curriculum, they demanded that the core curriculum be replaced from read these books, have this perspective as the dominant perspective, to instead having Brown come up with a series of courses that they refer to as methods of thinking. And that once you teach students methods of thinking, you then can give them access to the open curriculum. Because the Brown faculty couldn't agree on which methods to teach, they gave them the open curriculum without any kind of curricular guidance. And that was the beginning of the destruction of American higher education. It wasn't the abandonment of the dead white men, right? That was long overdue. It was not replacing it with systematic thinking. And that is the Minerva reform movement. It actually is to help universities construct programs that at their heart have these methodologies that aren't theoretical, that are applicable, and weave them into all of the learnings that they offer when it comes to subject matter courses later on in programs. And that's why we hope more and more universities join this reform movement, because we think it's not just crucial to prevent the disruption of those institutions, but it's crucial for society.
Well, and I wanted to add one thing, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this, because I had a conversation with a professor at a business school in one of the biggest universities in the country. And I was talking to him about flipped classrooms and adaptive learning, and really, how do you know they're hitting objectives? Because as a marketing consultant, I often criticize universities for their curriculum. I'm like, I want to sell something better, or give me a sense of what you do so we could put that in the enrollment process. But I wanted to say that he told me that there isn't a benefit to him creating a better course, because he would get marginally better reviews and it wouldn't be worth the time and effort it would take to do that. Like, I wanted to get your thoughts on that. And then he had said one of the other professors, he's since retired, but very recently, he was still teaching a case study on Kodak, who's been out of business for a while, and who was really evaluating on the quality of what they're teaching and how they're teaching it, if students are actually learning what they're supposed to be learning in outcomes.
What you have put your finger on is the
You just got Ben started. He's gonna go. He's going now. Watch out for this.
This has been my pet peeve for
this is like the issue. This is the thing. Go, Ben, go.
This is exactly the thing, that the movement away from curricular perspectives in higher education that universities abandoned in the late 60s and early 70s shifted the responsibility of education to the individual professor without any incentive to do so. And in fact, every incentive not to do so. There is no solution. I mean, let me draw this out for you. Let's assume you wanted to learn how to play tennis. And I'm going to tell you, okay, I'm going to spend a fortune teaching you how to play tennis. I'm going to assign you 4 different coaches, and each one of them is going to coach a different aspect of your game. Only problem is, none of the coaches have actually ever played tennis themselves. None of them know how to coach. They've never been trained how to coach. They've, maybe one has designed sneakers and one has designed rackets and one has, figured out about like court conditions, but none of them are actual players. And each of these 4 coaches you're going to be working with for 4 months, but they'll have no idea what the other coach is telling you to do. And you just, have to do whatever they say. And then, just to make sure, 4 months into your training, I'm going to fire all 4 of those coaches, hire 4 totally different coaches that have the same background as those other 4 coaches, not knowing how to play tennis themselves. They will also not talk to one another and have no idea what the previous coaches told you to do. That's our educational system. But you're not learning to play a game, you're learning to be an enfranchised citizen.
Yeah, absolutely. Right?
And so the only solution is for the university as an institution to reclaim its responsibility for curricular design and oversight. And then when a student shows up in a professor's upper level class talking about their field of expertise and that area, they receive a learner that knows how to learn, that knows how to evaluate the difference between a fact and a claim, that understands second and third order effects, that understands how to tailor their message depending on the audience that they're hearing, etc. The learner is ready to learn, and the professor is set up to succeed in teaching them. That can't happen without curricular ownership at the institutional level.
Renee, you got another one? Yeah, if you got another question, roll, because I'm going to give them the final 2.
Go for it, Joe. I mean, I can go on and on, because this is a topic that is near dear to my heart, because if you're marketing a university, you're trying to enroll, what's the story you're telling? What's the unique proposition? And how do we make the outcomes the center of that unique proposition? How are we upskilling and reskilling? How are we coming out with people that are productive? And there's a big gap, right? Like in people, there's all these job openings and not the right skill sets that match up with them. And how do the universities solve that gap? So, but Joe, I can go on.
Oh, I mean, this is why I brought you on, because I knew that you were going to kill it, Renee, and you have. We ask Ben. We ask the same guests. We ask the same questions to every guest on every episode to end. And number one is, what did we not say, or what did Renee not ask you about Minerva? I'm sure I asked you everything I was supposed to ask, and Renee totally forgot something. But what did we not ask you about Minerva that we should have asked you? Anything coming up, events you're attending, plug away, website, just plug. And two, what do you see as the future of higher education?
Sure. Perhaps related. First, on the university side, Minerva also offers an extraordinary master's program. It's a master's in decision analysis to teach systematic thinking to professionals and up-and-coming and current executives. For those of you who think that a Minerva education would be an amazing experience, but haven't had the opportunity to, or won't have the opportunity to just move to 7 different countries, highly encourage you to look into the Minerva, the master's in decision analysis. And on the Minerva project side, the corporation, I very much invite, if this perspective has resonated with any leader of a high school, a university, if you're trying to do right by your students and trying to salvage not just the institution's legitimacy, but the sector overall, and approach it from a position of leadership, talk to us. If we can be helpful, we're delighted to partner with institutions from all different types of backgrounds. So that's that part. And I think, to piggyback on that, on the future of higher education, the future of higher education is going to, I believe, behave like COVID being the earthquake that it was, except the COVID earthquake happened deep on the ocean floor. And it wasn't actually felt by institutions yet, but it is generating a tsunami. And that tsunami is a tsunami of accountability. And those institutions that embrace systematic learner outcomes, programs that ensure that every learner graduates ahead of the quote unquote education or best education that is out there in the top ranked institutions, those institutions will flip the script on higher education. And those institutions that go back to how things were before the pandemic, not next year, not the year after, maybe not even 4 or 5 years from now. But when there's a critical mass of these programs that effectively prepare students for life, graduating thousands of students into the marketplace, that tsunami is going to sweep over higher education. And institutions that aren't preparing themselves to be part of that tsunami are going to be swept away.
Don't get swept away might be the title of this episode. Ben, we like to come up with funky titles. Boy, did I have a good time. Ben, it's been great to talk with you now for the second time. It won't be the last, I'm sure, as we, now that we know each other, it's like we just like see each other more often. Once you meet somebody, you're like, oh yeah, Joe does that. Oh yeah, Ben's over there. Renee, before I outro Ben here, I want to thank you for your first time co-hosting ability. It was so good. I'm going to invite you back immediately. Ladies and gentlemen, and since I'm not going to do the applause twice again, she's CEO of Ellison Ellery Consulting. She's a marketing guru. Her name is Renee Seltzer. Look at that. You like that? I got more. Awesome. I mean, I can keep them going all day. And ladies and gentlemen, our guest today, he's founder of Minerva Project, Chancellor of Minerva University. His name is the amazing, I think it actually comes as part of his name, the amazing Ben Nelson. Ben, an honor to host you, my friend.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. And thank you, Renee.
Yeah, this was so enlightening. And I hope everyone's listening and they call you and say, I'm going to improve my curriculum. I'm going to improve my outcomes.
We hope so.
Yeah.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. You've just EdUp'd. The purpose of education is to help learners discover their aptitudes and interests, develop their skills, and then deploy that knowledge to benefit themselves and others. The Charles Koch Foundation, a nonprofit grant-making organization, works with leaders in education to remove barriers that stand in the way of all learners reaching their potential. They support individualized and flexible models that improve access and quality for millions of Americans. They also support apprenticeship and upskilling programs that connect learners to in-demand jobs that match their skills and interests. The foundation is looking for new partners to challenge the status quo and transform the post-secondary education system. Learn more about their partnership opportunities and apply for a grant at ckf.org. You can also find them on Twitter at C. Koch Foundation and LinkedIn by searching Charles Koch Foundation.